Hello, everyone. Welcome to the SoxProspects.com podcast, the web's #1 source for information on the Boston Red Sox farm system from top to bottom, from Fort Myers to Pawtucket and Marshfield Hills and all stops in between. Thank you for the listen. My name is Chris Hatfield. I'm the executive editor of SoxProspects.com. I am joined, as always, by our director of scouting, Ian Kundle. Hello, Ian.
Hi.
And guess what, guys? We have a special guest. That is the website's editor-in-chief, founder, and the dude himself, Michael Andrews. Mike, welcome.
Hello.
Welcome
Glad
to the
to be
Oh,
podcast.
it's not. I thought
What?
this was the ex-Red Sox player.
Oh no, that's another guy.
How are things
Oh,
at the Jimmy Fund, Mike?
I'm off. See ya. I didn't sign up for this.
We are joined by Mike today because this is our special season-end rankings edition of the podcast. We're recording this on Saturday the 13th. It is the same day as day one of the ALCS, and we are in a good mood. We have no idea what's happening yet tonight, but so if we sound happier than we should be, we apologize. If we sound like we are not as happy as we should be, we apologize, and it sucks that we can't make you happy. But no, we're excited to be here all together to discuss the season-end rankings that went up yesterday on Friday the 12th, with I think a fair amount, guys, of shakeup, especially even as high as number 2 in the rankings, which maybe, we usually do kind of step back, make sure we're not, just keeping guys where they are for the sake of keeping them where they are. But it felt like there was a decent amount of shakeup this year compared to past years.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I'm the one who kind of does the web editing for these every month, and so I kind of have for like 15 years now. So I kind of have a feel for like how much we usually change the rankings, and I feel like this one in particular, like you said, especially at the top, was one of the bigger shakeups we've had in the last few years in the top 10, top 20 range.
I think that kind of lends itself to a lot of what we've been talking about, though. That it's like there's a few tiers, but they're pretty large tiers, and everything's pretty fluid in there. And so you have, a few guys jumping up tiers that I'm sure we'll talk about. But
Yeah.
For the most part, it was kind of just rearranging within those tiers based on, second looks, etc.
I'm looking right now and assuming that, well, maybe not assuming, but at least on our spreadsheet that we have, I think 4 guys are ranked in the same spot they were last month, which has got to be some kind of record. But we'll get into that. And I think you're right, Ian. There was something that came to mind as I was mentioning this. It's things like they had a really good draft this year, and we hadn't been able to see most of those guys. And you went down to Instructs, you saw them, you reported back. We talked about a lot of that in the last episode. But when you have that sort of thing, we have a guy jumping into the top 20 from last year's IFA class who was unranked in the last rankings.
And we don't even have a picture of yet.
Yeah, which is kind of insane.
That's my favorite part.
Yeah.
Pictureless guy.
I don't remember the
page.
last time we had a top 20 guy without a picture. Top 40 definitely, but top 20, I don't think in the last 5 years that's happened.
Well,
Did
then
you-
there's another guy at 30 who doesn't have a picture either.
Right.
Did you have that image, not available image already, or did you have to make it?
Yeah, I did. Hadn't used it in 3 or 4 years. I feel like there was somebody in the 30s, maybe 3 or 4 years ago, that we had to. Didn't have a picture for right away, and eventually found one. But I want to say it's been 3 or 4 years, even for the top 40.
Probably some IFA, right? But like pre-social media.
Yeah, definitely.
Because now in social media, everybody, that's the thing now on Instagram. You post your signing photo.
Mm-hmm.
So we can get photos of guys. Like I think that's Anthony Flores' photo right now. Do we have an action photo? No, that's Danny Diaz's photo too.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's anyway, yeah, it's kind of crazy. But it's you take a system that was already somewhat thin, that got this injection of talent, and that's what you wind up having. So it's really interesting. We're going to start at the top. I should mention, go to SoxProspects.com or I guess just SoxProspects.com. That's the front page. That'll get you where you need to go. Really quick, we should give a shout out to our $5 level Patreon supporters. That'd be Sox Signatures, Kirby Miller, Kyle Costigan, Tyler Woodrow, Jeff Trainer, David Nardone, Tim Harding, Ernest Shermer, Bill Stanton, Deb Kendall, Evan Kirkwood, Chris Fox, James O'Hara, Nathan Kenyon, and Andrew Wallen. Thank you to all of them. Also, we're going to get to a few of your emails today, and we want to talk about what you want to hear about. So send your emails to podcast@soxprospects.com. Questions about the rankings, what guys are doing. We're not going to really touch too much on the Arizona Fall League or Winter Leagues, but maybe you've got a question about that. There's plenty to talk about, but we want to focus on what you guys want to hear. So make sure you send us your emails if you've got questions, thoughts, concerns, and we'll definitely try and get to them as soon as possible in our next episode once you email us. So, gentlemen, let's kind of take it from the top, I guess. Some months when there's new rankings, Ian and I just kind of jump right into certain guys who moved a lot because there's nothing really to talk about. But at the top, we should mention the top 10. We've got Michael Chavis stays at number 1. He's one of the few guys who did not move. And he is followed by Tristan Casas, the first-round pick from this year, who jumps from 5 all the way up to 2. He's followed by Jay Groom at 3, Bobby Dahlbeck at 4, Darwinzon Hernandez at 5. And from 6 to 10, we've got Tanner Houck, Brian Mata, Anthony Flores jumping into the top 10, CJ Chatham, and Turbin Feltman at 10, who, interestingly, is one of the 4 guys who didn't move at all. Meanwhile, there were guys moving all around him, so it's kind of interesting. But interestingly, so the way we do this, I guess we should mention briefly, is the 3 of us do our individual top 70 rankings to create a top 60 list. You want to go out, we go out to 70 because that way, you want to have the top 60 be all guys who were ranked. We create an average ranking from that, a composite ranking, and we tweak from there, tweaking both our rankings and each other plenty in our, in our back and forth, frankly. But yeah, we just kind of go back and forth on, guys that might be too low, guys that might be too high, asking each other questions, generally pissing each other off. And at the end, we become friends again. And hopefully we don't hate each other too much. But
there's about 4 days every month that we might strangle each other, and then it's fine the other 26 days of the month.
Yeah, basically. And, those nice 32-day months. But this month, and for our season end rankings, interestingly enough, even though Casas moved up from 5 to 2 and Jay Groom moved up from 4 to 3, we had the same top 3, which is interesting. And I think part of that was just this pre-discussions we had. Really quickly, I guess, just to get this out of the way, any thought to moving Michael Chavis out of the top spot, Mike?
Nope.
Ian? You're on
No.
mute. Yeah, no.
Yeah, sorry. No, it was, yeah.
He's pretty clear. He's the only guy we have projected as a 5 still in our grade scale.
He'll be the only guy on the top 100 list from the system this year.
Yeah, and I think he moved up in MLB Pipeline's list, right? He moved up.
Yeah, he's like 70 or 69.
He moved up to 69. So it's a pretty nice ranking for him. But sorry, actually, no, I'm not. But yeah, he interestingly enough, hasn't played yet in the Arizona Fall League, even though they're about 5 games in. So we'll have to see if there's anything to that. But it might be maybe they're going to play him off position or something, and he's working on defensively. Who knows? But yeah, Chavis cleared number 1. Really, kind of the movement was from 2 to 7. I think was kind of a sort of a tier. Ian, you saw Casas down in Instructs, so I guess you kind of reported back to us. What to you made Tristan Casas the number 2 prospect in the system?
I think he has the combination of upside and already kind of showing that presentability. He obviously he didn't have the greatest AFL instructional league when I was down there, but he looks the part, and you could see that the talent there. And then in workouts, he looked really good. I think he's got a good swing. There's potential to hit. There's potential for power. And even if he ends up at first base, the battle play. And that kind of gives him, I think he's got kind of a higher floor than you would think for a high school guy just because of the hit tool. And he's obviously going to strike out a decent amount, but everyone does these days, so it doesn't really matter.
Any chance he stays at third?
I would say no. I think he's a first baseman all the way. But even at first base, I think the bat has more. There's more than enough juice in the bat to play. And that's kind of, that upside was kind of what separated him from the other guys. It's easy to project him out.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm, for sure. And it kind of an interesting situation where you said he and Danny Diaz were switching between third and first.
Yeah.
You play him at third, but I wonder when they're just going to go ahead and pull the trigger on moving him.
Yeah, exactly.
Number 3 was Jay Groom. Jay Groom really just a tough guy to rank for me, and I think we all kind of struggled a little bit with this, maybe not. But for a guy who, maybe we should get to one of our emails It was in an email or was it on Twitter? I think it was the email, right, Mike?
I think it was an email.
Okay, yeah. So we got an email. Why did I go back to my regular inbox? That was stupid.
I mean, the gist of it was when do we
Here
think?
we go.
Yeah.
Oh no, the email was about De La Guerra. It was a tweet. Yeah, okay. The question was on Twitter from at Reality Beaker, who apparently can communicate with more than just meep meeps on Twitter. But Beaker asks, where do you envision Jake Groom playing next year and around what time? Who should he be back? A great question, frankly, and I think that's part of why we struggle to rank him because he's probably not going to be back till like August, right?
I got to think. So he had Tommy John surgery on May 15th. You're looking at a 12 to 14 month recovery is generally what's going on there. And in the months 12, if you come back, months 13 and 14 are generally like slow 1 inning rehab. So I could see there being like a July 1 inning stints in the GCL. And maybe if everything goes right, he's back for a couple of starts in Greenville or Salem in August. That's really the best case scenario. I think that the worst case scenario is he doesn't pitch all of 2019 and loses essentially 2 years of development time, which creates a major problem. It's how do you ramp if you miss 2 years of development time? How do you ramp that person back up to becoming a starter long term? And how do you all the learnings you're going to get from that time period, you're kind of losing out on. It's really tough. So that's why the ranking of Groom is so difficult. And you guys have talked about that ad nauseum. So I'm not really adding a lot there.
Well, no, and with him, it's not just 2 years. I mean, he only threw 55 innings in 2017, and then only 6 innings the year before, 7 innings. So,
well, as a pro, I mean, he pitched his high school season.
Yes,
yeah,
but so more he's not even pitched like half of a full season, and it'll be entering. If he misses all of next year, he'll be entering his 5th year, and he'll have about 60 innings under his belt professionally. Yeah. Like that's not ideal. But at the same time, if he comes back healthy, there's extreme upside. So it's just
when we saw him,
tough guy to rank.
We saw him on that day in spring training last year, and he looked like the best starting pitcher I think we had seen maybe in the last few years. That one, it was outstanding.
Yeah, who's the last pitcher you would even compare to him that they've had?
Anderson Espinosa and Instructs was pretty good.
Yeah, that's probably it.
Good call.
Probably Espinosa. Yeah, and I mean, the nice thing is maybe he takes this time and he can continue to work on the body. So there could potentially be upsides to it, but we're not going to see till he comes back. But yeah, that was kind of a pretty clear top 3, I think. So I think it might be maybe a better use of our time to talk a little bit about the debates we had, kind of in the next tier, honestly, which isn't really typical for us to really kind of go back and forth. There was something of a debate between us, even though we wound up all having Brian Mata at 7. But the next tier, which again was ranked from 4 to 7, Bobby Dahlbeck, Darwinzon Hernandez, Tanner Houck, and Brian Mata. We didn't necessarily agree on how to rank those guys. To me, it was basically because I didn't want to rank any of them 4th, frankly, just because they all have. And maybe that sounds worse than it is. It's just that, to me, the depth in the system feels like it's back to where I'm comfortable with it, but I still think that they could use another 2 or 3 guys in that top 5 area that I felt a little bit more confident about. But you look at a guy like Dahlbeck, who's got definite swing and miss issues, which we're already seeing in the Arizona Fall League. I mean, the Arizona Fall League Bobby Dahlbeck experience so far. He's 2 for 11 with 2 doubles, 3 walks, and 8 strikeouts. And if that's not the Bobby Dahlbeck experience, I don't know what is. Maybe he'll get hot probably in the next week or so, and he'll hit like 3 home runs over the next week, and that'll be the complete Bobby Dahlbeck experience. And then you've got from 5 to 7, you've got the 3 pitchers this year who headlined the Salem rotation, and I think were 1, 2, and 3 in some order in the Carolina League in walks. So, I mean, it really was kind of difficult for me to kind of figure out where to rank those guys. I guess maybe, Ian, what to you, you've got the one outlier third baseman where you have to figure out where he fits, but then we're kind of, maybe it's a little bit easier to figure out where Hernandez, Houck, Mata rank relative to one another. What kind of played into that to you really quick? How did you figure out where to rank those guys? They're all, 4.5 projections for us, all with a 6 ceiling. 3 floors except for Houck, who we have a 4 floor for, which is a tough thing to say. But yeah, I mean, how did you decide to rank those guys? I guess for reference, for everyone. Both Ian and I had Hernandez fourth, and Mike had Dahlbeck fourth.
Yep.
So Ian.
Yeah, I would say I had Hernandez fourth, and I look at him that I still think he has a chance to start. He's probably like if you had to give me like a percentage, I would say it's slightly it's more likely he ends up in the bullpen, but I still think there's a chance to start. 3 pitches, and he's left-handed, which is what separated him a decent amount from the other pitchers. Just being a lefty inherently gives him a better chance of success, in my opinion, because lefties are in demand. And so worst case, he's a lefty out of the bullpen, which, I mean, we've seen the Red Sox. They don't have a lefty out of the bullpen right now, I don't think.
Literally, no. So, they set the ALCS roster today, and they kept it the same, so there's no lefty.
Yeah.
So, I guess Eduardo Rodriguez.
True. But,
isn't.
Yeah, he's like a starter, though, kind of. But so they don't have any, like, true relief types, and I think he could be that. I mean, we're kind of seeing it in the AFL already, where over two inning stints, he has 11 strikeouts in 4 innings, which is kind of good. But I think there's a decently high floor with the out of the bullpen, and after seeing him, there's a chance he could start. And if he's a starter, you're looking at like a number 4 type, which pretty useful player. Whereas I think Houck's a reliever. I've seen his delivery, like he's back to it. I just don't see that starting. And Mata, I didn't get a chance to see him this year, but there just was a lot of reliever buzz talking to scouts who did see him, and he seems to have kind of taken a step back from where he was delivery wise. He's put on a lot of weight, and I kind of want to see what happens next year with him. So that's kind of why he dropped for me. And then Dahlbeck was the tough one, but I'm just really concerned about whether or not he can hit. I mean, I've seen him at his best. I've seen him at his worst. And it's kind of just like a shruggy face at this point. Like if he has a 30 hit tool, then he should be the number 4 guy. Heck, he should probably be higher, but he also could have a negative 10 hit tool, in which case he's a 4A player. So at this point, he's kind of, it's kind of a hedge, and that's why he split those guys up for me.
Mike, how about you?
I went with Dahlbeck at 4, based solely on ceiling. Essentially, what Ian was just saying. I think that there's maybe a 10% chance that he's a role 6 player and turns into an all-star, but there's also a 70 to 80% bust rate there. I just think if he could somehow pull it together and work on the strikeouts, cut that down, he's got everything else going on defensively, the right build, power, mentality. I just think that he has such a high ceiling of being a potential all-star, but there's a low chance of it. A couple of weeks ago, we were having a discussion. I thought maybe there was a 20% chance of him being a Rule 6 player. You guys kind of talked me off the ledge. Maybe it's 5 to 10% chance, but I just think that there's something there that could turn into that player. But again, there's a very high bust potential where he turns into a 4A player that just never cuts it at the major leagues and ends up playing a couple of years in AAA. So that's why I had Dahlbeck at 4.
Sorry. Even in the major leagues, I could see Dahlbeck as like the guy who'll have a year where he hits 50 home runs, like almost maybe like a Chris Davis with a C, where he'll have a season where he hits 50 home runs, and he'll have a season where he's like the worst hitter in baseball. No, seriously, like I could see that. I'm not necessarily projecting it, but I mean the nice thing about Dahlbeck is he's got the glove where you can deal with it, though, right? Mm-hmm. So yeah, it's interesting. To me, it was kind of I had Darwinzon. I think I had moved Darwinzon ahead of Mata, in part because the thing with the 3 of them with Hernandez, Houck, Mata, it's okay. Say all 3 of them wind up in the bullpen, right? Mata in the bullpen just doesn't excite me the way that the other 2 I think could be like late inning leverage arms. I think Mata, he might have the best chance to stay in the rotation, but the thing is, to do that, I think he's going to need to add a pitch if he adds like a cutter or something this year. At age 19, he's got the best chance to do that. He's younger than the other 2, but it's tough to project. It's like the reason why, looking back, I always go back to Papelbon. I probably do too much, but it's like if you saw Papelbon becoming what he became, you were almost wrong. You were right for the wrong reasons, because it's like you didn't see him adding the split-fingered fastball as his second best pitch. You know what I mean? There was no way you could have projected that. So with Mata, it's like you almost have to project him to have a pitch he doesn't have. So that's tough for me to do. And I looked at Hernandez and Houck, and I'm just like, Hernandez has the better fastball right now and potentially the better breaking ball. And if the end of the year, that he went on in his last 8 starts, Houck was better when he reincorporated the 2-seam fastball than he was earlier in the year. But during that period, Hernandez was better than Houck. So that's kind of why I'm just like, wait, why am I ranking Houck ahead of him? I like Hernandez better. I just see him. There's a chance that Hernandez is a future closer for the Red Sox. I think it's a very small one because that's a hard thing to project. But I wouldn't be surprised. I mean, look at what he's doing in the AFL, like Ian said. I don't know. Maybe that's too much to say for Hernandez right now, but that's what I kind of reconsidered. And I mean, Dahlbeck, I think it's like I said, it's a crapshoot. But that's just a really interesting tier to me. It wouldn't surprise me if Mata wound up being the best of the four still. But yeah, that just kind of struck me as kind of the B tier in this, or maybe the C tier in the system right now, if you consider Costas, Groom the B tier behind Chavis. To me, guys, then we kind of had this grouping. Even though, from 8 to 12 is kind of a tier in terms of those are all guys we project as 4.5 grades, followed by, kind of the cutoff to the 4s and, 4.5 minuses with Lakins kind of randomly in there at 16. But really from 8 to 22 or so was a tier. And I guess, like I mentioned, we had Anthony Flores at 8. Flores notably moved up from number 14 to number 8, in large part based on what Ian saw at Instructs and the reports we got back on him. Followed by C.J. Chatham at 9, down from number 7, but really that's just kind of, I think that's really more Flores moving ahead of him, although that's a point. Maybe we should stop there and just kind of debate that because it's two short stops. You've got a guy in Chatham who was in high A this year, and you've got a guy in Flores who got 2 games stateside. Which is just, again, it's, even if it's apples to apples, it's an apple that's you can't eat for another 4 years versus an apple you can eat in a year. Flores versus Chatham for you guys. Mike, you were on the island with Chatham, so maybe I'll go with you.
Yeah, I had Chatham ahead of Flores by just a tick. I like what Chatham did this year with the bat coming back. He was our comeback player of the year, hit 314. Didn't really have enough power to kind of really impress us. But he played well defensively. So impressed, did kind of what he was supposed to do, what we expected him to do. Flores kind of came up from DSL, big signing, big bonus. And then we kind of got stuck and had an injury-riddled season once he hit the GCL. So I just picked Chatham by a tick because he's already done it, and I actually haven't seen a whole lot of video, and I haven't seen Flores in person yet, so I wasn't ready to make that jump. But he's a guy that we could see in the spring, or I could see come May of next year that we have him ranked 3 easily. If we see him a little bit more, he has a month of plays well wherever he ends up early in the season. I could see him taking off really quickly.
Would you say that? I could see him at 3 out of spring training, honestly.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, quite possible.
Ian, you just saw him. So you actually just saw both of them. And it was actually interesting to me that you said Chatham was hitting for a little pop down in Instructs, even though, I'm looking. He slugged 389 this year, which is something that I kind of realized in August. And I was just kind of like, whoa. Even though he hit 300 this year, there just wasn't a lot of pop in the bat. But you still had Flores ahead of him.
Yeah, in the modern game, Flores is kind of your prototypical high upside shortstop. I think he can play defense. It's potential above average defense at short. So the only tool he really lacks is he's like a 40 runner, but that's whatever. It doesn't matter. He's got really good instincts, and I think he can hit. I think there's a sneaky power in there. He's got that projectable frame, and I just in this case, when we're moving down in the back end of the top 10, I'm gonna take a chance on the upside because with Chatham, even if it's best case scenario, he's, a glove first shortstop who hits 280 with, a 320, 340 slugging. Maybe he hits 5 to 10 home runs a year, maybe a little more than that if the power he showed in Instructs is kind of what he is now. But I just, I think that guy's kind of easier to find than what Flores gives if he reaches even, his 75th or above percentile ceiling.
Yeah, I mean, even as young and kind of slight-ish as he is, I mean, it's a 528 slugging this year. Granted, at an incredibly small 15-game sample size, but seeing the full package in action next year will be something that I'm looking forward to. He's probably the player I'm looking forward to most seeing in spring training. Honestly,
nah, there's another one.
There is. Oh,
Jimenez.
yeah. Not even that. I know where you're going with this. Maybe we'll mention it at the end of the show.
Oh, I got it. I know.
But it'll cost you. Yeah, all right. So at number 10 in the rankings is Durbin Feldman. We've talked about him. We did get a question about Feldman on Twitter from Mark G at Grudex. And Mark asked, he had two questions. One of them, which was a good one, is when do you foresee Durbin Feldman contributing to the Major League team? Feldman was a guy, obviously, who got a lot of buzz this year. Jim Callis, I think it was, called him the guy in the draft who could move the quickest to the major leagues and could potentially have helped this year with a team that is now in the playoffs using starters as setup men. But that said, I don't think any of us are saying he should have been in the majors this year. But that said, it's a fair question. He's a guy who shoved, got all the way up to high A, and I don't know. What do you guys think? Where do we see Feldman? When do we see him in the majors next year? Is it next year? Ian, you saw him this year. What do you think?
I think it's next year. I think he gets a non-roster invitee to spring training.
I think that's a clear one.
Yeah, and then he'll pitch there. If he shoves there, I wouldn't rule it out. Start the season. I just don't. I think they're more likely though. They'll send him to Portland for like a month, and then either bring him up directly from there or go to Pawtucket for a week and then bring him up. There's no point in wasting his bullets in the minors at this point. Like, he's good enough to pitch in the big leagues. His stuff is what it is. Nothing's going to change. It's just about him just getting those reps and just, consistency with command, but his command's already pretty good. So I'm not that worried. And yeah, I think next year, definitely.
When?
I think that he'll be up by mid-May.
Wow. Michael.
I'll go August 15th, and not because of the talent. I totally agree that he'll get a non-roster invitee. He'll probably pitch well in spring training. He'll probably go to Portland. Won't spend a ton of time there. Maybe be in Pawtucket by June or something like that. The issue I see is I really want to see how they build the bullpen for next year. I think that they need to kind of restructure the entire thing. It's kind of a mess right now. Kimbrel might not be back. So they might need to sign 2 or 3 relievers to clean up the mess that the bullpen is right now. And then you got a bunch of guys without options. So I could see them saying, okay, we're not going to make room. We're not going to cut a guy until you have the space. You can kind of BS it in August until September call-ups. But I could see a situation where they just don't have any guys with options, so there's no space, so they don't call them up until then. But really, if they have guys with options, then maybe he gets the call in May. But I'm going to guess August 15th.
Yeah, I think that's the tough part about projecting when a guy's going to go to be in the majors, right? Because it's about when they have room. I mean, Rafael Devers was promoted when he did because they desperately needed a third baseman. If Pablo Sandoval had been hitting great, Devers wouldn't have even come up that season. So, it is what it is. I think I'm probably with Mike, though, that it's probably late next year, maybe in August, in part because we have no idea what the bullpen's going to look like. So, yeah, thanks for the question, and we'll get to your other one, Mark. Moving down, I guess, into the next 20, and we'll probably maybe go a little bit quicker because we're already half an hour in. But from 11 to 20, we've got Nick Decker at 11, who moved up from 12. Nothing big there. Mike Schwarin at 12, who maybe bears a quick mention because he fell from 9 to 12. But as happens sometimes, you really can't look at what one guy did from month to month, because I think Schwarin falling, quote-unquote, to 12 was in part because Flores passed him, as he did 4 other guys who were ahead of him. One was he fell behind Feldman, and one was Decker moving ahead of him based on what, in part on the report that we got from Ian from Instructs. And I think Decker, did we wind up? Yeah, I mean, we increased Decker's ceiling to a 6 because he just looked really good down there. Schwarin, I think we've talked a lot about him on the podcast, guys. Mike, you've seen him as well too, but do you think that that's a fair, it's really more Decker, Flores passing him and maybe just kind of rethinking Schwarin versus Feldman?
Yeah, I don't think we think any less of him than we did 6 weeks ago when we did the September 1st ranking. Right. I think we think of him the same way. It's just that the other guys passed him. So he's same grade, same projections we have on him. To me, I'm not sure I see a starter. I saw him late in the season in September in Pawtucket, and the big concern I have is the pitch, his balance of pitches and the sequencing of the pitches he uses. I just don't see a starter there. He just leads with his slider like most pitchers lead with their fastball, and I don't remember a lot of starting pitchers that throw 70% sliders and lead with their slider and work everything else off of that. I'm sure someone will correct me, and I'd be happy to hear that there's
Tyson Ross,
major leaguers are out there that are throwing that many sliders, but I just don't see it. It's not something you typically see in a starter.
Tyson Ross is the only one I can think of.
Okay.
He pitches off his slider. But yeah, I agree. I think it's just Decker and Flores have a lot more upside than Schwarn. Schwarn is what he is. Like, we've talked about it a lot. I think he can be a valuable major league player. But guys, Decker and Flores have significantly higher ceilings, and they just showed enough. And the reports we got from the rest of Instructs after I left were very good on both those guys. So there was more them passing him than anything, or them moving up because we got more info than anything Schwarn did.
At number 13 is Brandon Howlett. We've talked a lot about him. He moved up from 17 to 13. Again, Ian, just a guy that actually, did you see him much in Instructs or no?
No, he didn't play. He was just working out. He was good though. He played like in inter squad games, and he hit some bombs in those, and he looked really good BP. He's a good player.
Yeah, exactly. Danny Diaz at 14. We talked about how he looked on the last episode.
We should talk about him for a second.
Okay, about him for a second, Ian.
Just because I saw him and I talked about him, I was a little down on him.
That's true, but the report, right?
And we kind of we talked about at the end how it also could be rust. Like, he missed a lot of the season because I think it was a broken hamate, I want to say.
Yes.
So, and obviously that's something that can really impact you at the plate. And just getting reports from the rest of Instructs, I guess he looked a lot more comfortable as Instructs went along. And so that was just good to hear. And people were a lot higher on him the later games got. I guess he was showing some feel at the plate. The power was starting to come back. He actually looked surprisingly decent enough at third base later on. So he was someone who initially maybe it seemed like we were a little bit down on, but that's why we kind of talk about that. You can't base, you need to get a full picture, and you can't do that based on, 4 games the beginning of Instructs. So that's why it was good to get those reports and kind of why he stayed. I don't know where he was before, but I think he's about level of where he was in September.
Mm-hmm. Jarren Duran comes in at number 15. Mike, you were the high guy on him. Duran moves up from 19 to 15. What do you like about Duran?
I mean, he just came in and dominated 2 levels off the bat and did not have almost any downtime for the entire, what did he play, roughly 67 games. It was almost like, and this comparison is not a comparison I am making to the player, but it was reminiscent of what Mookie did back that second year he came in. I think it was his. Did Mookie have? I think
it was his second full season because he went to Instructs and then to Lowell in his first full.
Yeah, so it was just reminiscent when you just come in and just absolutely dominate the level. Jarren Duran is not Mookie Betts by any stretch, but that dominance is something you don't see all that often. So I was just excited by that. I did get to see him on MILB.TV a little bit. So just an exciting player to watch. Not a ton of power there, but it seems like a disruptive player that kind of can disrupt the game with on the base path, hitting doubles, hitting triples, just doing the right stuff on the bases, plus speed. He really excites me.
Alrighty, I like it. And honestly, with these guys, we're talking about their rankings relative to one another. I think we all agree that kind of the guys in this range, there's nothing too much to ranking guys for spots one way or another, frankly. So even though you're the high guy, I don't think you're crazy or anything like that. Mm-hmm. It was not because of Duran. Sorry. Wait, no, I'm not. At number 16 is Travis Lakins, down 3 spots, but it's, again, you could take these guys in any order. Maybe we should mention Josh Ockamy down 6 spots from 11 to 17, graded down to a 4 projection. I'll speak to him a little bit. It's just, one thing that scares the crap out of me is lefties crushed him this year. His lefty splits were not good. And I don't love the idea of a platoon first baseman in the major leagues right now who's not great defensively, even though he's putting the work in there. He did hit 20 home runs this season, and that's not nothing. But even if you look at what he's doing in the Arizona Fall League right now, 2 for 11 with 5 Ks, no extra base hits. Again, there's only 2 hits. A 3-game sample, so, whatever. But only 1 walk. I wonder what his profile looks like in the major leagues. I can't see him playing for the Boston Red Sox in any kind of full-time capacity, honestly.
They're already pushing their luck with the Pierce Moreland kind of platoon, and he's not as good defensively as those guys, and he's not as good at a hit tool as those guys. He might have the power of them ceiling-wise, but I don't know. I'm not excited about that.
It's kind of funny. I say a platoon first baseman, and then, of course, the Red Sox are platooning their first baseman right now. But I think that's more in part because they had a plan coming into the year. It involved Hanley Ramirez, and then when they released him mid-season, that was kind of the stopgap measure of, okay, we can make this work with Steve Pierce, trading only Santiago Espinal. And it's working out so far. As I mentioned on Twitter, when you can turn a below-slot 10th-round pick into a guy that's contributing on a playoff team that is advanced to the ALCS, that's a player development win. At number 18 is Nick Northcutt, draftee from this year. He did not move at all, so he stays right where he is. At number 19 is Alex Scherf. Scherf down 3 spots from 16. Ian, I think we talked a little bit about him last week. We'll probably leave it there. Want to talk about the number 20 ranked player who is up from unranked, and that would be center fielder Gilberto Jimenez. Gilberto or Gilberto? Do we know if it's a soft G or a hard G? We'll find out next year, I guess.
Yeah.
But Gilberto or Gilberto Jimenez,
or Gilberto.
I guess it could be
Gilberto Jimenez. I don't know.
Who did you have for Spanish class in high school?
I had, Steers, Stowell, and...
Oh, you guys were from the same hometown? Sweet. New Hampshire, the hat of Massachusetts.
Somebody's jealous.
Did I tell you guys about Lauren and I, quick tangent. Lauren and I were in Charlottesville one weekend. We went to this, antique bookstore. They actually had maps of different states from antique atlases, and we bought a Florida one for her and a New Hampshire one for me. And when we got home from that weekend, I looked at the receipt, and the receipt had, the 2 maps on there. One said Florida, and the second one said Vermont. And I was so angry.
What an irrelevant state.
I was just like, oh, that hurt, man. That hurt. I didn't think that would happen to me in Charlottesville, of all places. Anyway, tangent. But anyway, Gilberto Jimenez or Gilberto, or who the hell knows how to say his name. But at any rate, got good reports on him after Ian left Instructs. Got good reports on him from people in the system, in the front office. They really like him, and as a guy who came into the system really raw. I didn't even realize they signed him as a 17-year-old. They didn't even sign him as a 16-year-old. He got a 10K bonus. Name of the last show was based on him. Comes up in rank number 20. How do you guys rank a guy? I think I was surprised by how, without even really talking about it, we all had him ranked in about the same area from 18 to 21 on our rankings. How do you rank a guy like this? Ian, I guess you were the guy who saw him. What tells you where, okay, you know what, we're going to jump this guy right into the top 20 based on, like you just said, it's hard to get from one look at a guy, and even with reports, that this is a top 20 guy in the system.
Yeah, it's the ultimate hedge. I mean, you could make the case that he belongs in the top 10 right now. You could also probably make the case that he doesn't belong in the top 30.
Yeah, you said that top 10 nonsense, and I shut that right down. But.
You could make the case he has that type of upside. The odds of him reaching it obviously are low, but I mean, he's a raw athlete who's learning switch hitting and kind of already, starting to take to it a little bit. His right-handed swing is really good. He's projectable. There's just a lot to like there. They don't have many athletes like him in the system. But at the same time, he's 17 and has played. He had 250 at bats in the DSL, and then a few at bats in the instructional league. Like, he's probably 4 or 5 years away from making the big leagues. Like, there's a long way to go. A lot can go wrong during that time. So it's the ultimate hedge, and I think 20 is a good spot for him for now because he's below the guys who have already been stateside and kind of made an impact to varying degrees. With the Danny Diaz, Flores from the international side, and then behind the draftees we kind of have a track record with them. We've seen Howlett, we've seen Duran, we've seen Northcutt all play, we've seen Scherf. And so kind of just 20 seems like a good hedge spot because upside wise, he's within, probably top 5 in the system in terms of overall ceiling if he reaches it. But, at this point, it's just such a long way to go that you kind of have to split the difference.
Where do you guys think that Flores and Jimenez are going to start next season?
That's a great question.
I think Flores goes to Greenville.
Really?
Wow.
Yeah.
That would be aggressive. I mean, that would be great in a second. I mean, that's literally. I mean, well, let me ask you this, Ian. Do you think opening day Greenville, or do you think
probably not? He'll probably do like the Xander Bogaerts thing where he's down for 6 weeks or something and then goes there. Because
I think that's they're going to have to base it on a big sample size. I think there's no question he starts the year in extended.
I mean, I wouldn't rule out Greenville for him because they don't have anyone like. There's no one if they like him enough and they want him to get him consistent at bats starting the beginning of the year. There's no shortstop from last year's draft class who's going to hold him back.
Well, who would hold him back? But it's also not like there's a hole there either. I mean, the Spinners roster had like
I know they have
guys who could play shortstop.
Yeah, I mean the bigger question to me, I think Jimenez is extended too probably, and they go to Lowell. I would guess he will. But the bigger question to me is what they do at third base in that level because you're going to have Northcutt, Howlett, Casas, and then Danny Diaz, who I don't think goes to Greenville. I think he probably goes to Lowell, but still, like, that's a lot of guys down there for the corner spots.
Yeah. So, it's like we're seeing 2 tiers of corner, or I guess just infield clutter, almost.
Yeah. Because Casas, Howlett, and Northcutt are all going to Greenville. Like, I don't think you guys would disagree with that.
Mike does.
Who did he say?
According to Casas, Howlett, and Northcutt. On the projected rosters right now, as of this second on the website, and we haven't discussed this, is probably one of the next things we need to discuss as the site brass. But right now on the projected rosters, we have Casas and Howlett in Greenville and Northcutt and Lowell, but that's probably just more of a Northcutt and Howlett both need to play, and Howlett clearly seems to have passed Northcutt on the depth chart.
And you got to play Granberg somewhere. Yeah, they just have a lot of corner guys, so. I don't know. I think that Flores has a better chance than Jimenez to go to Greenville, but I mean, if they both show out and the Red Sox want to be aggressive, which we've seen Dombrowski do before, then you can't rule it out.
I mean, if they put Luis Lozada and Kerwin Suarez
in
Greenville this year, then they certainly could put Flores there to start the year. That said, maybe they've learned from this year that Lozada and Suarez maybe shouldn't have gone to Greenville on opening day, and they should have just gotten a few weeks and extended. I don't know.
Counter that, both of those guys, neither of them have the hit tool that Flores does.
Fair. Yeah, good point. The comparison is maybe not apt. But
they both did, like Flores, they both played in the GCL last year, or the year before, and then got a couple ABs in Lowell. He didn't get that, but they played in the GCL like he did. Granted, his was like one at bat. But, yeah. I don't know. We'll see.
Yeah,
it's going to be interesting.
Jimenez not getting promoted. I think that part of the question was Jimenez too. We didn't really get into him too deep yet. But I think part of the thing with Jimenez, where he didn't get the promotion from the DSL to the Gulf Coast League this year, I think he almost certainly goes to one of the short season teams, likely Lowell.
Yeah, I would agree.
I think to go to Greenville, he would have had to have gotten the promotion that Flores did, although he was hurt. And actually, recently got promoted that the general soreness was a shoulder injury, I believe.
Interesting. With Jimenez too, I think I wouldn't want to expose him to more advanced pitching this early because he still is learning to switch hit, and his weak side is his left side, and so
where he's going to be hitting most of the time.
He's going to be hitting most of the time, exactly. So I'd rather he get more work and extended, working on that, and then kind of start either in the GCL or in Lowell against kind of lesser pitching than you see in full season leagues.
Yeah, and one of the comments we got on him was he's so raw that he's just learning that he's good. Like he's almost still building his confidence to oh wow, I'm a really good baseball player and really good athlete. I didn't realize that because he was a $10,000 bonus guy a year ago.
Exactly.
So
Good
he's
point.
like, oh wow, now I'm. I mean, not that he's looking at SoxProspects.com, but now the front office is thinking me as a guy. So now I got to like build up that confidence, and maybe he doesn't do that in Greenville.
Yeah, I think he led off all year for the DSL team he was on, right, Mike? Does that sound right?
It does, off the top of my head. I wouldn't quote us on it.
I'm fairly certain he did.
Sounds right.
Well, he was their Latin Player of the Year too, which I think is, when you have like Flores had a good enough year to get promoted. Obviously, he got hurt though. Diaz got hurt, but was hitting bombs. They had a couple pitchers who threw really well. It's kind of interesting. It's noteworthy, I think, that he was the guy they chose.
It was either going to be him or Angel Maeta, really. Those are the only two real candidates they had, yeah. Mm-hmm. Interesting. All right, noting that we are about 45 minutes in, gentlemen, we'll move on to 21 through 60. I'm not going to go ahead and recap the whole thing, so I'll pick out a few guys to ask about just based on, I think, the movement that they had is what I'll base it on, and then you guys, I can throw it to you guys, too, with players you want to discuss. By the way, just to mention, the player we were discussing earlier in the show who didn't have a photo on the front page was Roberto Jimenez. Just looking really quickly at like 21 to 30, one of the biggest jumpers in these rankings, if it weren't for guys like Jimenez jumping to 20 from being unranked, Chase Shugart jumped up another 14 spots. He had jumped into the top 40 at the start of September. He's now all the way up to 21 after being drafted this year in the 12th round out of Texas. Ian, you love him. I mean, I know I keep asking you about him, but what makes Shugart that high? What gets him into that spot?
He's a good pitcher. He's one of those guys. If he was 6'3", he'd be in the top 10 in the system. Problem is he's 5'10", which is why he's down where he is. But he's got feel. He throws 4 pitches. He's got feel for all of them. He show you a plus slider, above average curveball, like averages changeup. His velo was. He can run it up into the mid to high 90s. He's athletic. I mean, there's just a lot to like there. And he was really good in instructs. Both I saw him once and then just getting reports from his other starts, and everyone always came away impressed with him. The question is, I mean, and this is what's holding him back is he's a 5'10" righty. And that's a tough profile. There aren't very many of those guys who succeed in the starting rotation. And so for now, it's kind of a hedge of I want to see how he can go out there and handles, working 6 innings every 5th day. Can the body hold up over a full season? And how does the velocity look, second time through the order? So those are kind of the things I'm looking for next year. But he's just someone who I've seen him 3 times, and just every time he's been very impressive. And yeah, the reports match it up.
Very good. Mike, I'll go ahead and ask you about this guy because you were kind of vindicated a little bit. From Ian's reports from spring training on Pedro Castellanos. Mm-hmm. And he's a guy, I'm trying to think, can I use profanity on this or not? We gave you a lot of crap for this year. Yeah. And by we, I mean me. Yeah. When we mentioned earlier in the show the fights that we have, I'm pretty sure in person you may have punched me over Pedro Castellanos and my constant needling you of why on earth you still have Pedro Castellanos so high. He's a first baseman who still hasn't hit a home run. But then Ian comes back from spring training, from instructs, and says, "Oh, scouts still really like him. He still really hits the ball hard in batting practice. We should have him higher." And by higher, meaning where you've had him all year. I guess part of this is an apology, and part of this is a chance for you to beat on your chest a little bit.
Well, yeah, I mean, I'm not going to gloat because I'm wrong half the time too. But on this one, half.
Generous.
I'll give me a break. So I like Castellanos because he hits bombs in batting practice. The guy has insane raw power, and that was dating back to last year and this spring, just hits bombs. So he has the power. He was the GCL batting champion last year, so he's got a hit tool. He's not a fantastic defensive player. He's probably going to be a first base left field guy. But I just think if he could pull together his approach, wait for his pitch to hit, or be aggressive in get that pitch to hit. He's not picking the right pitches to try to kind of hit. Like if they could get somebody like JD Martinez or like Mookie to work with him in the spring and just be like, look, man, you gotta pick your pitch to hit, and it can be early in the count, it can be late in the count, but you got to go in there with an approach and a plan. He doesn't really have that yet, so I think that that's something that can be built in a player, and he kind of started to develop a little bit towards the end of the season, but I just think I see that potential there long term to have somebody that has a hit tool and incorporate his plus power into game action over the long term. I don't think there's a great chance of it, but I think that there's some chance of it where he could develop into an impact player.
You know, at the risk of getting too meta into, kind of rankings and how they work, I think we were a little aggressive after spring training, pumping him all the way up into the top 20. That was, of course, in part of, well, maybe not, because I guess there's a lot of 2018 draftees who are ahead of him right now who would have pushed him down to 25 where he is right now, right? He's 25? Yeah, he's to 25 after being ranked 30th last month. I do wonder if there was a little bit of like, oh crap, we put him a little too high and we moved him down too far, kind of an elastic sort of thing, or we maybe overreacted a little bit. I don't know. But he's kind of an interesting sort of case study. And, look, the statistics you see, we get asked questions a lot. How is this guy with great statistics ranked so low? Or how does this guy with terrible statistics still ranked so high? Well, this is why. Pedro Castellanos statistically this year did not have a good year. He hit, one home run as a first base left field guy in Greenville as a 20-year-old. I mean, he's young for the league, but not like he's 18. But
he had 302.
He had one.
No, he had 302.
Oh, 302.
The power is a major concern.
Yes, yeah. So I mean, he's got to get into that pop, but we always say
it was also an injury mid-season that was something that could have zapped his power, we thought, and it's not striking my mind what that injury was, but
did Alex report on that?
I just feel like there was something that I thought was okay. There's an injury that I think is sapping his power, but I don't remember off the top of my head what it was.
Yeah, fair enough. I figured as an olive branch that allowed you to beat your chest a little bit on him. Jabbing me and being wrong more than 50% of the time. Fair enough. Esteban Cruz is another guy who we should probably talk briefly about. Moves up from 41 to 29 this month. Ian, you saw him in Instructs. It's just a weird profile. We talked a lot about him last week. Tough guy to rank. I should probably mention he's played in one game in the Arizona Fall League as of today, and he went 2 for 3 with a bomb and 3 walks.
And he walked 3 times. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, there's potentially there's a player in there. It's just it's tough. He's a guy who raked for a month and got hurt. He was our April Player of the Month, right, Mike?
That sounds right.
Yeah, I'm fairly certain. Yeah, he was. We didn't put it on his profile, so maybe he wasn't. But
yeah, the profiles have been updated, so he wasn't then.
Okay, fair enough. But he was close, I think, and then he got hurt. Is probably what happened. But yeah, missed pretty much the entire season after hernia surgery. Just a weird profile. He's 26. An interesting guy to look at for the Red Sox going forward. Who second base is kind of a weird situation for them, given that Pedroia basically just missed an entire season with a knee injury. I don't know. Kind of interesting situation with Queiroz. Ian.
I concur, but I mean, he can hit, and he's close to the big leagues. I think he could be up next year if they wanted to. I'm not sure he's I don't think he's an everyday guy, but I think he's someone who could be a useful player to someone. And yeah, that's kind of why he's up here.
Don't you guys think that Chris just said it, second base is going to be interesting coming in the spring? You're going to have Pedroia maybe coming back, but you almost have to hedge your bets. They're not going to be able to sign a permanent second baseman because no one's going to want to come in here knowing that Pedroia is there kind of as the stalwart of the position. So you're going to have to hedge your bets of Pedroia potentially missing time with an injury or just not going to be able to come back because of the injury. So you're going to have to line up a bunch of guys as the possible Pedroia fill-ins, and you have Marco Hernandez, you have Tony Renda, you have Brock Holt, and Esteban Quiroz is in that as well. It's kind of like there's 4 guys there, maybe Chad De La Guerra too. There's 4 guys there that are going to come in and maybe be competing in spring training next year.
I just love that you threw Tony Renda in the middle of Marco Hernandez and Brock Holtz. I'm sorry.
Don't underestimate Tony Renda, man. Don't sleep on him. He's a player.
I will underestimate him. No, I don't know. I mean, I was just about to say, it's funny you mentioned Marco Hernandez. How much, if Marco Hernandez were healthy, you just pencil him in there. I mean, he'd be the perfect fit for that, because then if Pedroia comes back, he slots into a utility role. How about Zue Lin for that spot?
Sure.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I could see you've got one more year of arbitration, Brock Holt. I guess you, in theory, have one more year of Eduardo Nunez, who could potentially be your guy there. I mean, Kinsler made sense because he was a free agent at the end of the year. I don't know. I have a feeling that they're just going to go with what they've got at second, and if they get into trouble at the end of spring training, then go get someone. I don't know what they're going to use to trade for that, but I don't know. It's kind of an interesting. Anyway, I don't know. Ian, any thoughts on second base?
Not really.
Yeah.
We'll talk about it in spring training. We'll have a clearer picture after the offseason.
Fair enough. One group of guys I guess we could potentially talk about are pitchers that you saw that we got reports back on from the Fall Instructional League. One of those is a guy who is now ranked. Where do we have him? 30. I, of course, moved up to the 40-man roster. Yeah, a guy who we have now ranked at 30, another image not available guy, and Brian Bello, who was he the? No, he wasn't. He wasn't even the pitcher of the year in the Latin American program. Interesting.
Miguel Suero was. Yeah,
Miguel Suero was. But Brian Bello ranked 30th after last month being number 55 in the rankings. Great reports on him from Instructs. And maybe we should also kind of mention there, Yohan Ibar jumped up from number 60 to 36. We also jumped up, let's see who else. Aldo Ramirez from unranked to now being ranked 49th in the system, a guy who we've gotten great reports on from spring training. Yasel Santana, I guess, is probably the fourth guy I would put into that group. Santana ranked 54 this month after being, I guess he dropped one spot, but he was a guy I think we ranked after seeing him in Instructs. Ian, just great reports on those guys. Why do we have them as high as we do?
With Bello, he kind of has, I think, the best chance to start of those guys. It's a projectable frame. He's like 6'2"-ish, 170 something. Fastball is already up into 94, 95. There's a slider and a changeup. Some feel for each of them. The slider can get a little cutter-like, but it's got some sharp break. It's a pretty good pitch. He just has upside and kind of, the starter package for what you like to see in a pitcher who has a chance maybe to stick in the rotation is like a number 4, number 5 starter. Loose arm, delivery's got some effort, but who doesn't these days? So Bello's just kind of an interesting arm, and he's got a chance to start. And in the system that, we talked about a little bit, but everyone we kind of is a reliever. Anyone with a chance to start deserves to be ranked, somewhere in the top 30, 40. So that's kind of why he's up there. And obviously it didn't hurt that he shoved this year in the DSL. Yeah, in the DSL this year.
He split the year between the League and Summer League, and he moved up. He made 13 starts in the DSL, and he got 1 3-inning relief appearance where he struck 6 guys out and only allowed 2 hits. So in the GCL.
So I mean, just with that, and then with Ibar, obviously throws really hard. We've talked a lot about him. There's a scouting scratch up about him from Instructs if you want to check that out. But he's a pure relief type, and he's a long way away. So that's kind of what keeps him in the 35-ish range. And then the last guy you mentioned, Aldo Ramirez, was another one that I didn't see, but just got good reports on. He's a projectable guy, loose delivery. He signed out of Mexico, which you don't see very often.
Well, he might be one of the last guys to sign out of Mexico for a while, because the MLB put the kibosh on teams signing guys out of Mexico until they change kind of the dynamic of how that works, apparently.
Yeah, but he's got a chance to start. He's got flash to plus changeup. Curveball has average potential. He's really young. Right now he's 88 to 92, so it's more projection than present velo wise. But there's just there's some interesting tools there, and he's another one to watch going forward.
Yeah, Ramirez, he only made 5 starts in the Dominican Summer League, but we've heard apparently that he only made those 5 starts and they just shut him down because of a workload that he already had from pitching in Mexico. So,
That's not surprising, as we saw with like Hector Velasquez. They
right.
use their arms kind of liberally down there. So
Yeah. Yeah, but I mean, 0.39 ERA and a 0.57 WHIP will catch one's eye, even if the strikeouts weren't necessarily eye-popping in the DSL. So good debut for him. Interesting to see what they do with some of those guys. Bello, a guy who's going to be basically in his 20-year-old season next year. That's a guy who probably has to go straight to Greenville, right? I mean, if he's going to be 20. I mean, maybe not.
if he's going to be 20 before the year or during the year,
May, he turns 20.
yeah, maybe. He signed late though. He signed as an 18-year-old.
Yeah, I guess he's not really a Rule 5 concern because he's interesting that he was a July 2 signing in 2017 as an 18-year-old. But at any rate, yeah. I mean, I guess now where you have caps and things like that, that makes sense. But yeah, man named Bello. I'm trying to think if there's anybody else we should really mention in kind of the back end. Anyone that you guys wanted to mention in kind of that back end group, or have we kind of?
I think we should talk maybe a little bit about Josh Taylor and Rodani Baldwin. Josh Taylor kind of popped up, and Rodani Baldwin has been kind of on, to use one of Chris's favorite terms, a free fall. So, Chris, why don't you talk about those? You're asking us questions.
Sure, yeah. Well, Taylor's a guy who jumped up to 40. Well, he's tied for 45 on the spreadsheet. Where did we wind up putting him? 46?
46, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, so he's in the Arizona Fall League. Went to Instructs. Basically, a lot of time these guys will go to Instructs and or the AFL. The Red Sox, of course, traded for Taylor this year. He was the player that they received in exchange for Devin Marrero as a player to be named later, I believe, right? Yeah.
Yep.
So, he's in the Arizona Fall League. He's made 2 appearances, 3 1/3 innings, only allowed 2 hits, 1 walk, 5 Ks. He's a guy who's really interesting, and Ian's gotten some scouting reports on him, really, so I'll throw to him in a second. But a guy who really hasn't been able to keep runners off the base paths. You know, in 33 games with Portland this year, in 35 2/3 innings, it's a 168 WHIP. But that said, he also struck out 37 guys in 35 2/3 innings. He's always had a high strikeout rate at around or more than 1 an inning. But just hasn't been able to keep guys off the base path. It's not necessarily just a wildness thing. You know, he allowed 42 hits in 35 2/3 in Portland this year, but still got the late season bump up to Pawtucket. They're sending him to the Arizona Fall League. He's Rule 5 draft eligible this offseason, which I think is interesting. I can't see them protecting him. I wonder how much of this might be a showcase.
He'll get drafted if he's not protected, 100%.
Okay. And why is that, Ian? I guess that's a good transition.
Because he's a lefty with a plus fastball and an above average to plus cutter. Mm-hmm. And he has, average command of those. He'll throw a changeup and a curveball also, but it's mostly fastball cutter. And that's the type of guy, especially given his, 25, 26?
Yeah.
Like, that's the type of guy you take in the Rule 5 draft because he could easily stick, as a minimum salary guy in the back end of a team's bullpen, especially if you're a smaller market team.
An interesting thought when we're going into Game 1 of the ALCS and the setup man of the Houston Astros bullpen is Ryan Presley.
The same exact thought I had.
Right.
Yeah.
Who was a Rule 5 draft from the Red Sox in kind of a similar situation where he was really off the
map.
The
Twins Rule 5'd him. You're right.
Yeah.
Thought about that.
Yeah, and the Astros went and traded for him this year, which is just a crazy thing for me.
They gave up a really good prospect for him too.
Yeah. So I mean, those are guys. I mean, it'll be interesting. Do you think there's any chance they protect him?
I do think there's a chance.
I agree.
But your instinct might be right too, Chris. Is that they could be showcasing him if they're putting the effort and they're kind of throwing him out there to the public at Instructs and then at AFL, that they're either looking to move him or that they got to protect him. Otherwise, they would kind of stash him and hide him and maybe not promote him in Pawtucket and kind of do what they've done before and kind of fly this guy under the radar. Nothing to see here, but it seems like it's one or the other here.
Yeah, it could be a situation where they trade him to a team that will protect him, right?
Right, who has the 40-man spot.
I haven't looked at their 40-man, though, to see who needs to be added.
I don't think there's a crunch, right, Mike?
I haven't done that analysis yet either.
So part of it depends on Joe Kelly's a free agent, Craig Kimbrell's a free agent, Drew Pomerantz is a free agent. Who now Pomerantz, there's no chance he's coming back. I feel like Pierce is a free agent. Evaldi's a free agent, Kinsler's a free agent, Brandon Phillips is a free agent, so that's 6 spots that open up. They have 4 guys they need to protect, Mike. Darwinson, Lakins.
I did do that.
If only there was a page where we could find out such things.
A list. Chavis?
No, Chavis is... Yeah, so they need to protect Chavis, they need to protect Lakins, they need to protect Darwinson, Hernandez, and there's one more. Who is it? I'm looking at the list. Compelling audio right here. Oh, Akami.
Yeah, Akami might be borderline now.
Akami's the other one, yeah. So there's 5.
Yon Ibar's up there.
6. He's not gonna
get picked, but there's somebody they could, like, someone could just take a flyer on and not have stick on a roster just because he throws.
You can't protect him because you
can't.
No,
definitely not.
Yeah.
Definitely.
No, you can't start his clock. I count 6 guys if you include Akami and Taylor. So they might have some interesting choices.
How do you count 6? We just counted 5 guys.
Well, did you include Taylor? He was the 6th.
We did include Akami in the 4.
Oh, he was in the 4. Then it's 5. Okay, sorry.
Yep.
But yeah, that's probably something we'll touch on late after the season's over.
Christopher Acosta's Rule 5 eligible. Anyway. Oh God. I'm going to have to say that at the end of the show, aren't I? All right, yeah, anyway. Yeah, that's an interesting question, what they do with Taylor. Maybe he does sneak on. I mean, part of it depends on, like you said, I think part of it depends, Mike, on the remake of the bullpen.
Yeah.
Because not only that, in addition to the guys who are free agents that I mentioned, they have a number of players in the 40-man who they could easily designate for assignment. I mean, you've got, let's see, Tony Renda, who I know you love, but in theory, maybe.
No, I think there's a definite chance. I could see Renda being a guy that competes for a backup spot next year. I could see him being a guy that they DFA in 3 weeks.
Yep. William Cuevas, same thing. Justin Haley, DFA eligible. Marcus Walden, DFA eligible. Chandler Shepard, DFA eligible. I mean, there's plenty of guys.
Yeah.
Austin Maddox, I don't know what the rule is with guys who are on the DL, but didn't he just have surgery? I mean,
yeah, I think he's got to come off the DL soon, so I think he has to count towards the 40.
But do they have to? Can they DFA him if he's hurt? If it's a, I mean, you have to. You can't be forced to keep a guy who's hurt, right?
Right. But he might have to they might have to have an injury settlement with him if he's injured for all of next year. They might have to pay him whatever salary that he would have made during the time he was injured, but you can still DFA him. Mm-hmm. Happens in football a lot.
Yeah. Carson Smith has to come off of the 60-day. Who the heck knows what happens there?
Gone.
Marco Hernandez has to come off of the 60-day. Who knows what the situation is there? I mean, it might just depend on their health, right? His health. Is the shoulder ever going to get better? So they have room. So I think maybe they do protect Taylor. That's interesting. That's an interesting thought. I hadn't thought through that all the way. The other guy that you mentioned, Mike, with Rodani Baldwin, before I get into him, do you want to just go ahead and do to me what I did to you on Castellanos? I'm the high guy on Baldwin, and it feels like every month I'm trying to say we should rank him higher, and you guys probably shout me down.
Well, you were trying to give me props on Castellanos. I'm kind of trying to bust your balls. If I was trying to be nice, I'd think of somebody else to say.
That's true. But you would have that in you, and you don't. So
I could certainly find a guy that you're right on if you gave me a few minutes. But Baldwin, you still like him.
Well, it's the potential for a hitting catcher is what I keep coming back to, and it's just I can't quit him. He's all the way down to 58. I mean, he started in the 20 to 30 range beginning of the year, I think, right?
Yeah.
And I mean, he's a guy who this year had an injury-plagued season. I think 3 different injuries. He started the year with a thumb injury of some sort that we saw in regular spring training that he had a thumb injury. Started the year late. At some point during the year, he was out with a concussion, and then he ended the year with a 3rd different injury. Right? I forget what it is, but it's a 3rd different injury. And I'm just thinking,
wrist,
okay, so
I think
there was something like that.
He had like a wrap on it instructs on his wrist / thumb.
Okay,
area.
well, I mean, it could be the same wrap that he had on his thumb in spring training, too.
I don't know. But, he had something on his wrist / hand.
He only played 53 games. I think a lot of those were probably at DH. 233, 282, 371 line from him this year, so nothing to write home about. But last year, he's a guy who hit 14 home runs and 35 doubles as a 21-year-old in Greenville as a catcher. And I wonder how much this year is going to turn into, like, at a much lesser level. I mean, if you look at last year in Greenville, after coming back from a hamate bone injury that sapped a lot of his power, Bobby Dahlbeck hit 246, 345. Okay, I guess 437, so the pop was there, but the hit tool definitely was there, a lot less than even it was this year for Dahlbeck as he was dealing with an injury. I think to a much lesser extent, I wonder if next year Baldwin might hit a lot better with an offseason to heal. It's just tough. I think there are definite questions about whether he'll stick a catcher, and that's probably why I'm wrong on him in terms of having him about 10 spots higher than you guys do. But I think that's a guy who has to stay. And if you're doing a top 60 in a system, a catcher who's got a 5% chance to hit and stick at catcher, maybe it's a little less than that. I just think there's still the chances there for a more complete catcher in Roldani Baldwin. I think that's why he's got to stay ranked, even if he is in a little bit of a free fall. I don't know if you guys can tell me why I'm wrong on him, but in a deferring to you guys, since not in a you guys are dicks sort of way.
We are dicks, though.
You are, but I'm just saying not in this particular sense. I mean, maybe I'm off on him, but I don't know. Maybe a lot will depend on what we see from him next spring, I think, on both sides of the ball.
Yeah, I mean, we're in the 50s.
Yeah, well, that's the other thing.
Anybody who's ranked 58 could be ranked 75, and really the difference is just like putting your finger to the wind.
Yeah, and that's going to get us to one of the questions we got, actually. Maybe this is a good transition to an email we got. And this email comes from Keith, and he not your buddy Keith Wade, but different Keith.
Keith Carl.
Keith, what's that?
Keith Carl is
the
one that comes to spring
Keith
training.
Wade's a different. Who's Keith?
What
I
up,
always want to
Keith?
call him Keith Wade. Yeah, hi Keith. But yeah, we got an email from a different Keith. He says, just checked out the end of year rankings and noticed that Chad De La Guerra was left out of the top 60. I know he had a tough start to the year, but I'm interested in how he went from participating in the AFL, included in the player development program, and a non-roster invite to spring training as a consensus top 30 prospect, to where he is now. Does this have more to do with young guys having higher ceilings than him as a utility/bench player, or has he fallen to being an org guy? Thanks for keep up the great work with the site. Thanks for the email, Keith. Yeah, it's an interesting question on that, and I think part of it is just, he for what it's worth, in our composite list, he's number 64. We all ranked him in the 60 to 70 range. Interesting, though, that he did drop 14 spots from the last ranking. He was number 48 last month, and he kind of fell. I think a lot of this is just guys from Instructs being really interesting and passing him. I mentioned Gilberto Jimenez, who's in a top 20 right now, was ranked behind Chad De La Guerra last month. Brian Bello, who is in the top 30 right now, was ranked behind Chad De La Guerra last month. We've had a lot of, jumbling of that kind of 30 to 60, 70 range, I think. He's a guy who I would have no problem in a top 60, and I'm sure you guys would probably say about the same. Mm-hmm. But I think there's just more interesting guys, and he had kind of a meh season. I don't know. There wasn't a whole lot to love from Chad De La Guerra this year. He stumbled mightily out of the box in Pawtucket, and then he ended the year, even in Portland this year, 266, 343, 462. I think he's definitely behind Zue Lin on the utility chart right now. I think he's probably also behind Esteban Quiroz. I think he's behind Tony Renda even. I think that Tony Renda spot at the end of the year is the spot that you would have liked to have seen Chad De La Guerra step up and take. So, yeah, I think that sounds about right. That sound right to you guys?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
All right. I guess I'll throw the door open to you before we get into kind of the last of our questions. Thanks for the email, by the way, Keith. The last of the questions we received on Twitter and points that have been raised in the forum. Anything else from guys who have been ranked or not ranked that you wanted to mention, or should we just throw to that?
Do we want to hear anything about Jonathan Diaz without the H, the catcher?
Yeah, Ian, what did you see about Jonathan Diaz, a guy who was unranked in our last rankings and is currently ranked
55.
5? Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
55.
He had a decent year with the GCL this year, and then in fall instructs, he looked pretty good in workouts. He wasn't playing in games, or actually, maybe he was. I don't remember. I didn't see him in games. I don't think, but in workouts, he looked decent, and then got a couple good reports on him. And I mean, he was just someone. It's like a back end of the list hedge, like kind of someone to watch. Not sure what's there. Didn't get a long look, but just someone whose name came up a few times in discussion. So I figured was worth getting on the list.
Chris, you on mute?
Yeah, I was on mute. Thank you. But yeah, Jonathan Diaz, Ian, is he a guy who, even though he spent this year in the GCL, he was 19. He was kind of a late signing. They signed him in July 20. He was a July 2 signing in 2017, but played right away as part of the Red Sox trying to, beef up their DSL affiliate after not being able to sign anybody for a year. Could you see him in Greenville this year as a 20-year-old? Turns 20 on July 7th.
Maybe there's a chance. Yeah, it's going to be interesting because I don't believe they drafted any. Did they draft any catchers last year?
Cole caught him, third rounder.
You're right.
Fourth rounder, sorry.
But other than him, I don't think they drafted anyone. Oh, Eli Marrero. Yeah, so he'll probably be in Greenville. Man, probably not. He'll probably go to Lowell. Yeah, probably not. Okay. And we'll see, though. A lot of it's going to be determined, like how these guys, who's healthy in spring training and how these guys play. So we'll kind of have a better feel then.
Right. Good point. Yeah, there's a lot of weirdness with the rosters, too, entering next year. They've got a few guys who are kind of percolating up to the point where they've got like 4 guys for the Pawtucket roster. Does that trickle down? Will be interesting to see. Interesting point on Diaz, Mike. The last Twitter question we had, this was also from Mark G, and Mark had asked us, with positional redundancy at third base, how do you see the next 2 to 3 years playing out at that position? And he's talking about kind of in the high minors with, he says Devers, Chavis, Dahlbeck, and possibly Tristan Casas. We've gotten this question in the past, so we'll just hit on it quickly. Casas doesn't enter that conversation. He's so far away. I've said I think Bobby Dahlbeck's a trade chip potentially this offseason if they feel like they need to trade for something. I think Bobby Dahlbeck fits every checkbox for a Dave Dombrowski trade guy. He's potentially at the peak of his value. He's at a position with some positional redundancy. And that redundancy is also in the majors where you've got a Rafael Devers, you've got Chavis percolating just below. I'll go ahead and throw out there, I think Devers starts the year as the third baseman again. I think Chavis starts the year in Pawtucket, playing both corners, and maybe he's also a potential option is getting some DH at bats in the majors, but maybe not right out of the box. You do have Josh Ockamy at first base at Pawtucket as well, and I think Dahlbeck, if he's around, starts the year in Portland, but I think he'd potentially be a trade chip. Does that sound right to you guys?
Totally agree. Okay.
The forum, where I need to find that thread. Let's see. Some thoughts from people in the forum that we wanted to respond to. We mentioned someone was surprised to see Shawaryn drop to number 12. We kind of touched on that a little bit. And this was a new member of the forum, so we kind of want to address their thoughts. He had a question of, I'm wondering why Sam Travis is ahead of someone like Bobby Pointer, although it's admittedly probably nitpicking. Seems like Travis is only a Plan C short-term option for the Sox at this point going forward. He probably needs to move to another organization. I don't think anything he said was wrong, but it's in another organization he could be better than what Pointer is for the Red Sox. Keep in mind, Pointer isn't even making the playoff roster, even with a guy like Stephen Wright going down with an injury. That sound right to you guys?
Yeah, I mean, Pointer's like a situational lefty. You can find those guys. If Travis could be like a fringy platoon starter, like platoon first baseman, bench, corner utility bat, and that's more valuable to me than a platoon or than a situational lefty.
We had a question pertaining to the grades from one poster in the forum, and he says, does Feltman only get a 6 ceiling because he's reliever only? The answer is yes. There's basically no such thing as a 7 reliever. If you go to our About page on the website, we list our grading scale there, and you'll see that for a reliever, the highest grade we can give is a 6. That's in part because they only play enough to be only worth so much. We correspond our grades with a kind of projected wins above replacement. And if you look at this year, Blake Trinan was the most valuable reliever in baseball in terms of wins above replacement, and he was, I think it was like a 3.7 or 8 on Fangraphs and like a 4.3 on Baseball Reference. Whereas the best starting pitchers in baseball, I think the best starting pitcher in baseball for wins above replacement on Fangraphs was Jacob deGrom, who was an 8.8. So that's more than double the value. And on Baseball Reference, I forget who. I think it was Aaron Nola, who was like above 10. But I remember seeing something where there's something about Baseball Reference's wins above replacement for pitchers that was particularly screwy as it came to Aaron Nola. But that said, again, you can get starters who are twice as valuable as the best relievers, and that's why you're only going to get a reliever with a 6 ceiling.
Yeah, we shoot for to get somebody who's going to have like a 5 WAR or above to be a roll 7 pitcher, and essentially just never happens. Mariano Rivera had that once in his entire career. He had a 5, and otherwise he averaged like a 3.6 to a 4. So it just doesn't really happen, even for Mariano Rivera.
Exactly. Yeah. So that's the thought there. I think that's about it. Yeah, we're not doing that. Yeah, I think that's about it. So I think we hit all the questions.
There was one at the end.
No, we're not. No.
Oh, you don't want to?
Nope. I don't know. Do you want to? The question.
It's like a 30-second answer, so I can answer.
The reason I didn't want to is because that poster's asked that about 17 times. But go ahead. The question is, I'm quite curious what that's. I don't know. I don't want to read it word for word, but it's basically.
No, I was talking about the next one.
The next one.
On the forum?
Posted. Yeah.
Oh, something just got posted?
Yeah.
Oh, did it just get posted? Oh,
yeah.
That's why. Okay, I need to refresh.
No, it's a much better question.
Okay. Your final prospect rankings with the addition of a number of players from the low minors is exciting. I hoped that Angel Maeta, or Angel Maeta, it probably is, 17-year-old with a good DSL season and projected to start in the GCL, and Ceddanne Rafaela, 18-year-old with power and speed, also projected to start in the GCL, were not in the top 30s. Did they exhibit poorly in the Fall Instructional League? Ian?
No, neither of them played in games. But no, I did see them both work out. Rafaela's
talk about them too.
Rafaela is like really small. He was like 5'8", and so I'm not sure about that power much. He's someone we'll have to see, but yeah, as it's just the size is kind of limiting. And then Maeta was pretty good actually. He in the field he showed he's playing right field, but it was like above average arm. The problem is he just physically is not there yet. He's probably 140 pounds and just has a long way to go developmentally, and that's kind of what held him back from the other guys who are a little more polished. Yeah, plus arm, needs to add strength. I thought he was rankable is what I said, but guys like Gilberto Jimenez, Flores, those types just showed a lot better than he did even in workouts and in games. Their tools are a lot louder and more polished already. So he's definitely got upside, but there's just a long way to go and not enough, didn't show enough to be consideration for the top 30.
Yeah,
we had Rafaela at 62, and I think we heard that he was a little bit banged up and didn't get to play at Instructs.
Yeah, and we have Maeta at 50, we should probably mention. And yeah, with those two guys, Rafaela had his hamate move just before Instructs, so that's why he wasn't playing. So that's another thing with him.
He was playing the field. He wasn't hitting.
Yeah, no, but he had his hamate ball removed just before Instructs. I'm surprised he was playing in the field then if he had the hamate removed. But
I don't know. I saw him take balls and throwing.
Maeta had just some nagging lower body stuff. So they just, they had him there doing the class. And we should probably mention, too, with Instructs, there's a classroom component of it, too. I mean, it's not just on-field stuff. So there's a bunch of different parts. It's worth bringing guys in for that. So there's definitely learning to be done, even if they're not necessarily playing in games. So, yeah. But, thanks for pointing that out, Ian. There was a different thing that was near the end that I thought you were referring to that didn't merit mention. But, yeah.
No.
Cool. Well, yeah, thank you guys for coming on. I'm glad, Mike, we could get you on the show.
Sure.
Celebrating our 15-year anniversary, I think, right?
Yeah, the 15th anniversary was about 3 weeks ago, so that was a nice milestone we hit. Got some good traffic off some discussion about that, so that was a big milestone for us.
It's almost time for the site to take the SATs.
Get its driver's license next year.
That's true. Oh, God. It's kind of, I was just thinking, Mike, did we do a 10th anniversary podcast?
I think we did.
We did, yeah.
We've been doing the podcast for 5 years. Wow, okay. It's more than that, too.
2009.
Yeah, I would suggest anybody, if you want to check, hear kind of the story of the website. Mike and I did an episode. Do you have an episode number for that, Ian?
1 sec.
Oh,
I think our first podcast was September 29, 2009, so the 10-year anniversary of the podcast will be right around this time next year.
Oh, wow. Yeah, okay. So it's the September 24th, 2013 episode of the podcast. That's episode number 45. Was Mike and I talking about the 10th anniversary of the website. Who wrote this description? We tried our hardest not to make this a backslapping, hey, remember when yuck fest. Did we succeed? Probably not.
That sounds like something you would write.
Yeah,
I
that's
think I
definitely-
did. Yeah.
God, you're cringy.
Wow. I'm not sorry about that either. Anyway, all right. Well, thank you guys for coming on. Thank you, everybody, for the download. Shout out to Joe Tetrault, our podcast Joe
Love
2.0.
Joe.
We love you, buddy. Thank you all for listening. Thank you to our supporters. Again, patreon.com/SoxProspects. You can follow me at SP Chris Hatfield. You can follow Ian at Ian Cundall. That's IANCUNDALL. And you can follow Mike at Mike Andrews SP. Every now and then he says he has a thought on Twitter.
Occasionally.
Very rarely.
Yeah, and of course,
I have
follow
a
the
real
site.
job.
Wow.
Whoa.
We
Shots
are gonna
fired.
We are going to have a fist fight. Thanks for listening, everybody.